Ryan Vale moved through the wreckage of the old skyport, his boots sinking into layers of ash and twisted metal, the air heavy with the smell of burnt wires and old rain. The city above him was gone, replaced by towers of alien steel that blinked, with blue eyes watching everything. He was not supposed to be here. No one was, but Ryan was not good at obeying orders, especially from the Korath Empire that had turned his planet into a farm for labor and silence. He had come searching for parts, and maybe a fragment of the old human satellites to sell for rations, but what he found was something else buried beneath the broken hull of a shuttle. Half melted into the ground was a small cube pulsing with a faint red light. It was warm in his hands, alive in some strange way. He turned it over and saw human letters scratched on one side, property of the Starborn Relay Corps. Do not tamper. The words made his throat tighten because Starborn was a name out of legend, a word that people whispered when they talked about the humans who had left the galaxy centuries ago, promising to return when Earth called again. Ryan pressed his thumb to the cube, and it came alive with a low hum. The air shimmered, and a voice filled the ruins, calm, clear, human. The voice said to whoever hears this message, you are the last echo of humanity. We send this to remind you that war has a price. You will regret. Remember that the cost is not in ships or weapons, but in hearts, in names, in futures that never get to be. The voice paused, then spoke again. Coordinates blinked in Ryan's visor, followed by the words, for the one who will not bow. Ryan staggered back, dropping the cube, his pulse hammering. He could not believe it. A message from the Starborn, broadcast to whoever remained. The signal might still be transmitting, which meant the Korath would be coming soon. He looked at the cube glowing against the dark ground, and his instincts screamed to run, to smash it, to bury it again. But something deeper stopped him. A thought that maybe this was what his father had talked about before the camps, before the silence. The idea that humans could still stand. Ryan picked it up again and felt the hum run through his bones. He carried it back to the shadows of the old terminal where his mentor Kale waited. Kale was older, bent from years of mines and scars, but his eyes were sharp. Ryan showed him the cube and told him about the voice. Kale went pale and said, "This thing will bring the end of everyone you care about. The Empire hunts every whisper of the old signal. They burn cities to stop it. You must destroy it." Ryan wanted to listen, he really did, but when he looked at the cube, he saw the stars inside it shifting like a heartbeat, and he felt a pull stronger than fear. The cube responded to his hesitation, glowing brighter. Kale swore and reached for it, but the light wrapped around Ryan's hand, sealing itself like a living glove. Lines of light crawled up his arm, the cube melting. Into his skin he cried out, but the voice returned softer this time, saying, "Courier accepted." Kale stepped back, terrified and angry, saying, "Ryan, you don't know what you've done. The Korath will sense that signature. They will come before dawn. We have to move." Ryan could not speak for a moment, his vision filled with star maps, roads of light stretching beyond the moon. He saw a symbol of a great ship and heard a name, Aegis. He knew somehow that it was waiting for him somewhere in the cold. Beyond, Kale grabbed his shoulder, shaking him, saying, "You have to choose right now. If you run, you might live. If you follow that thing, you'll die." Ryan met his eyes and said, "If humanity ever sent a message, then maybe it's time someone answered." Before Kale could reply, the night split with a scream of engine searchlights burned through the ruins. Korath patrol drones sweeping low with weapons armed. Ryan grabbed his pack, slung it over his shoulder, and sprinted through the wrecks, the light chasing him, every breath burning his chest. Kale shouted for him to hide, but Ryan kept running, the cube pulsing like a heartbeat, guiding him toward the old launch tunnels. He dove into the dark, while lasers tore the air above him. He fell, hard-rolled, and heard the voice again, whispering coordinates, repeating them over and over as if afraid he would forget. Outside, explosions thundered, but Ryan crawled deeper into the tunnel, holding the light close, whispering to himself that maybe this was what it meant to be human, to keep moving even when everything told you to stop. Ryan woke to the hum of the relay core still pulsing inside his arm, the light fading and returning like breath. The tunnel around him was cold and silent except for the dripping of old pipes and the distant echo of patrol engines above. He had escaped, but not by much. The Korath were already sweeping the ruins, and they would find his tracks. Soon, he pushed himself up and moved deeper into the darkness following. the coordinates whispering in his head, every step drawing him closer to the desert, where the message said the last custodian waited. The air grew thin and dry as he climbed through maintenance shafts until he reached an exit vent opening onto the wasteland beyond the city. The horizon was red and endless, the bones of old towers jutting like broken ribs against a dead sky. He walked for hours, guided only by the voice that lived inside the relay. Sometimes it flickered and repeated words, half-broken fragments like, "Remember, mercy and war has a price you will regret other times." It was silent, leaving him alone with the wind and the ache in his legs. He thought about Cale and wondered if the old man had made it out alive. He wanted to turn back, but every time he hesitated, the light in his hand pulsed stronger, as if urging him forward by dusk. The ground began to tremble under his feet, a low vibration rising from beneath the sand. He stopped listening, and the voice spoke clearly, for the first time saying, "Destination reached, welcome courier." The sand split open before him, revealing a pit of glass and metal half buried under centuries of dust. Inside, something huge was stirring, a shape the size of a mountain, shifting like a beast waking from a long sleep. A gust of heat swept over him as lights ignited across its surface, forming the outline of a ship, the Starborn emblem glowing faintly on its hull. Ryan stood frozen in awe, realizing he had found what the message meant. The last custodian was not a person. It was a ship. A ramp unfolded with a sound like thunder, and a voice deeper than any human's filled the air, saying, "Identification, confirmed relay core, paired, welcome provisional Captain Ryan Vale." He hesitated, whispering that he was no captain, but the ship did not seem to care. It opened its gates and he stepped inside. The corridors were alive with dim blue veins of light flickering through walls of unknown alloy. Everything hummed like a heart trying to remember its rhythm. The main chamber lit up and a projection appeared, a woman's figure, transparent and calm. She said, "I am Aegis, the last Starborn vessel. I was ordered to sleep until a courier awakened the relay." Ryan asked what happened to the Starborn. Why did they leave Earth alone? The figure looked at him with sadness and replied, "They did not abandon Earth. They fought for it until nothing was left, and they sent one last message, so the next generation would not repeat their sins." She showed him recordings, battles fought among stars, human fleets shattered by Korath war engines, desperate transmissions begging for peace. Too late, the Starborn had created weapons that bent light itself, but in the end, their greatest victory turned to silence. Aegis said the relay holds two paths, one to vengeance through the Aurora Lance and one to truth through the proof. Key both lie within my archives. You will choose which to awaken. Ryan felt a chill run through him. The words vengeance and truth circling his thoughts before he could ask more. The alarms flared red. Aegis reported incoming ships. The Empire had tracked his signal and was closing fast. He ran to the control bridge, where a canopy of stars stretched above, holographic maps dancing around him. The ship's systems were sluggish from centuries of sleep, but still strong enough to fight. Aegis told him that activating any weapon would mark the planet and risk every human settlement. Ryan clenched his fists, saying he would not bring another firestorm to Earth. He asked for a way out. Aegis showed him a hidden route through the old orbital ring, a dead elevator that led beyond the patrol perimeter, but the climb would be deadly without help. Before he could answer, the floor shook under bombardment. The ship sealed its doors and the projection said, "I will protect you, but you must learn to command me." Ryan took the pilot seat, the controls molding to his hands, the voice in his head syncing with the ship's rhythm. Together, they lifted off through the collapsing pit, sand and flame spiraling behind them. As the ship broke through the clouds, Ryan saw the stars open like old friends above him, and something inside him changed. He was not just running anymore. He was carrying the last message of humanity, a promise buried for centuries and now awake again. He whispered to the ship, asking where the proof key lay. Aegis answered, "On Luna, under the palace of your enemy." And with those words, the night sky seemed to tilt, filling his vision with the endless road of stars and the weight of every human still waiting to rise. The sky above Luna burned pale silver as Aegis drifted through the dark between worlds, the engines whispering in long waves that sounded like thunder slowed down. Ryan sat in the command cradle, feeling the pulse of the ship through the floor, each heartbeat steady and alive. Aegis was healing itself, repairing systems that had slept for centuries, while Mara the drone pilot adjusted. External shields and Ishan the medic sorted through the rescued prisoners they had pulled from a gulag shuttle the night before. The ship still smelled of old fire and blood, and yet it felt alive like something human holding its breath for the first time in 1,000 years. Ryan watched a little girl sleeping in the med bay wrapped in a silver blanket. She had been the one who recognized the crest of the relay on his arm. She said her father had painted that same symbol on walls before the Korath soldiers took him. The crest had become a secret sign of hope. Scratched on doors in broken cities, the sign of the Starborn returned. Aegis had told Ryan that Luna held the proof key, a crystal archive buried in an ancient Starborn vault. But it also warned that the Empire had built their largest fortress above it, turning the ruins into a palace of obedience. It was said the prefect himself ruled from there, the one who had once burned half a continent just to erase a rumor. Ryan knew they could not simply attack, not with one ship half awake and a crew of survivors. So he spent hours in the training chamber letting Aegis flood his senses with old Starborn techniques, lessons of focus and control. The drills were merciless. Every breath timed, every motion tested until he could steady his heartbeat under pain. The Starborn did not use implants to grow stronger. They sharpened their minds until reflex and intention became one. The ship said it was how humans once won wars, not by strength but by clarity of purpose. Mara watched him and said he was turning into something else. He smiled and told her he hoped it was something better than a corpse. When the Korath patrols finally found them near the asteroid belt, Aegis was ready. The enemy came with 3 destroyers, their hulls black and curved like blades. Their commander opened a channel, calling Ryan a ghost playing soldier and promising to spare his crew if he surrendered the relay. Ryan answered calmly, saying the message he carried was not a weapon but a warning, and if they wanted it, they would have to listen first. The enemy laughed and fired without waiting for the end of his sentence. Aegis moved, like a storm weaving between energy bolts, the crew gripping their seats as Ryan guided the ship through the debris field. The ship responded to his thoughts, bending light around them until they were invisible, then reappearing behind the last destroyer. With guns hot, the blast tore the vessel apart in a bloom of red dust. The battle ended fast, but the victory tasted hollow. Ishan counted 7 civilians lost when a power conduit failed. Ryan stood in silence as the smoke cleared. He could feel the weight of every choice pressing down on him, the voice of the Starborn commander from the relay echoing in his mind, saying, "War has a price. You will regret." He finally understood. Those words were not about fear. They were about responsibility. He could see now how easy it would be to become like the enemy if he kept chasing revenge. Later, when they set course for Luna, Mara sat beside him at the viewport, watching Earth shrink behind them. She asked him if he really believed the proof key could change anything. He said he did not know. But the message had to mean something, or all those who died sending it would be gone for nothing. Aegis interrupted their talk with new data fragments. It had decoded from the relay. It showed 2 paths. Again, the Aurora lance hidden in the ship's core, a weapon that could vaporize fleets, and the proof key beneath the lunar palace, a record of the Empire's crimes and contracts, proof enough to turn their allies against them. Ryan felt the pull of both paths, one blazing with fury, the other with patience. Mara told him she trusted whatever he chose. Ishan said mercy was the only victory humans ever needed. Ryan closed his eyes and whispered that mercy needed strength to stand, and he would find both when they reached the moon. Aegis plotted the trajectory, a blue light cutting across the void. Ryan looked down at his hands. The relay's glow softer now, like a heartbeat that had learned to rest. He thought of the girl asleep in the medbay, of Kale's warning of all the faces he could not save, and he promised silently that he would not become another monster wearing human skin. The stars ahead shimmered like open doors, and the ship moved toward them, carrying the last message from humanity across the cold between worlds. Luna rose like a dead pearl before them, its surface pale and scarred with old wounds, the craters glimmering faintly under the weak sun. Ryan stood at the forward deck of Aegis, watching the gray sphere grow larger. He could feel the gravity of history pulling at him. Every story he had ever heard about the moon seemed to whisper through the static of the comms. This was where the Starborn once said goodbye to Earth before leaving to build the impossible. This was where they buried the secrets that now might save humanity again. Aegis spoke softly, saying that the proof key was buried beneath the palace of the Korith prefect, a place built over human bones and memories the ship showed him maps, tunnels, and old escape routes, and warned that this mission would not be won with fire, but with patience. Ryan gathered Mara and Ishan in the command bay, their faces dim in the blue light of the hologram. Aegis projected the structure of the lunar fortress, its walls made of mirror metal that twisted sensors and bent sound. There was only one way in, through the forgotten mining tunnels below the old colony district. Mara volunteered to pilot them through the debris belt and land. Near the shadows of the southern ridge, Ishan said he would follow Ryan inside no matter what. The prefect's soldiers would be ready. But Ryan reminded them, this was not a war. They were going to steal a truth that could end one when they landed. The silence was unreal. Even sound seemed afraid to echo. Ryan moved through the tunnels first, his boots crunching on frozen dust. Each step, a whisper of ghosts from centuries ago. His arm still glowed faintly with the relay's pulse guiding him. Deeper, the air grew colder as they descended. Metal walls gave way to stone carved with old human marks, symbols of unity, courage, and peace. It felt sacred. Mara whispered that maybe the Starborn were not soldiers, but believers who fought only because they had to. They reached a gate of black crystal sealed for ages. Ryan pressed his hand against it and the relay answered. Threads of light crawled over the surface, unlocking the door. With a deep sigh, inside was a vast chamber filled with holographic constellations glowing like living stars, and at its center floated a crystal heart, the proof key itself. It pulsed with every breath Ryan took when he touched it. The room erupted in light, showing scenes from the past, the fall of the old colonies, the betrayal of human allies, the rise of the Empire, and the birth of the message. He saw the Starborn commander, a woman with silver eyes who looked both ancient and young. She spoke, and her voice was sorrow wrapped in iron. She said to the one who carries the relay, remember our mistake. We thought strength alone could preserve us, but strength without mercy is just another name for chains. We made weapons that broke suns and lost ourselves in the noise. If you wish to honor humanity, then show them mercy, not domination. Ryan could hardly breathe. The images faded, and the room dimmed again. Aegis spoke through his comm, saying the proof key was theirs, but the alarm had already been triggered. The prefect had known they were coming from the start. Red lights flashed through the tunnels, and the sound of approaching soldiers echoed closer. Mara shouted that they were surrounded. Ishan was dragging a wounded Korith guard who had surrendered. The medic refused to leave him behind. Ryan wanted to argue, but the memory of the Starborn commander held him back. He told Ishan to stay close and help everyone who could walk. They ran through the corridors, blaster fire lighting the walls around them. Mara was hit by a shockwave thrown against a pillar. Ryan pulled her up. She smiled weakly, saying, "Don't let them take it." Ryan looked at the proof key glowing in his pack. He had seconds to choose. Aegis's voice in his ear said, activating the Aurora Lance would clear the tunnel, but would also destroy everything within miles, including the people they were trying to save. He closed his eyes and whispered, "No more war. No more prices paid in lives." He reached for another command, sealing the tunnel behind them while opening an alternate vent deeper into the mines. They escaped, crawling through darkness, choking on dust, the roof collapsing behind them. But they made it out onto the barren surface, gasping under the wide, empty sky. The palace above still stood, the Empire's flag still waved, but Ryan knew that something had shifted. They returned to Aegis, battered and bleeding, Mara unconscious. Ishan tending to Burns, the proof key safe in Ryan's hands. The ship's lights flickered as if breathing relief. Aegis told him the prefect would now know his name, that there would be no more hiding. Ryan looked at the earth rising beyond the glass horizon and said, "Let him come. This is not his world anymore. This belongs to those who still believe in mercy." Aegis said, softly, "Then humanity may yet endure." Ryan nodded, staring at the blue world shining through the dark, and he whispered that the next battle would not be for power, but for the soul of what it meant to be human. The days after Luna felt like moving. Through smoke, Ryan barely slept. Aegis was alive again, yet scarred from the last fight, its outer hull burned and engines humming unevenly. The ship had become both sanctuary and ghost for the crew. The proof key rested inside a containment chamber, glowing softly like a heart still beating somewhere in the dark. Ishan tended to Mara, who had not yet woken from the blast, her body frail under the med lights. Rian sat in the command seat staring at the projection of Earth, its blue oceans wrapped in chains of Korath stations, each one pulsing like veins of control. Every second the Empire broadcast its victory, declaring that the rebels had been crushed, that the Starborn rumor was nothing but dust. But Ryan knew the signal from the proof. Key was spreading underground through pirate channels, through old resistance bands and broken satellites. People were starting to see the truth. Then the message came from the prefect, his voice cold and precise, filling every frequency. Rian Vale, the one who carries the forbidden relic. You have something that belongs to the Empire. Surrender the proof key, or we will erase 10,000 hostages, one for every hour you hide. His image appeared beside the transmission rows of civilians standing under orbital cannons, their eyes hollow, their fear alive. Ryan's hands trembled. His first instinct was to give himself up. Ishan told him it would change nothing. The prefect would kill them all, whether Ryan surrendered or not. But Ryan felt that old human ache, the one that demanded he save everyone, even when he could not. Aegis interrupted their argument, saying the proof key contained not only evidence of the Empire's crimes, but also control codes that could expose every hidden order and ledger that kept their power alive. If broadcast at the right moment, it could break the illusion that the Empire was divine. It would show the galaxy that their rule was built on fear and debt. Rian looked at the display of the hostages and felt the weight of the last message echoing again in his mind. War has a price you will regret. He understood now that victory without compassion would poison everything they were fighting for. He called Mara's name, and to his relief, she stirred. Weak but awake, she told him she could still pilot the drone swarms if they could reach the atmosphere. He smiled and said he needed her more than ever. They formed a plan, desperate and fragile. Ishan would organize underground clinics through encrypted channels to prepare for the civilian fallout. Aegis would dive through the siege lines, broadcasting the proof key. Across every Empire frequency, Mara would unleash a cascade of jamming codes to blind the orbital cannons for a few moments that would be all the time they had. The day of the strike began with silence. Aegis rose through the shadow side of the planet, engines dim to avoid detection. When the first beam from the Empire ships tore across the void, Ryan ordered evasive pattern Delta. The ship rolled between the streams of light like a dancer made of fire. Mara's hands shook as she guided the drone swarms into position. Ishan patched wounded refugees who had joined them after Luna. The proof key glowed brighter, feeding energy into the broadcast arrays. The data storm erupted across the Empire network, flooding every channel, with records of genocide, contracts with mercenaries, experiments on human colonies. The illusion cracked. The galaxy began to see the truth. The prefect screamed through the comms, calling Rian a liar, a criminal, a monster who would doom his own kind. But Ryan did not answer. He focused on keeping the ship steady, while Mara counted down the seconds for the jammers. When she reached one, Aegis cut through the clouds, diving straight for the orbital control towers. The cannons froze blind and powerless. The hostages below began to run free. Chaos spread through the Empire's lines. The prefect's fleet opened fire on each other. As confusion broke, discipline, Ryan saw the opportunity to escape, but he stayed to cover the civilians. He could not abandon them. Not now. Aegis took hit after hit, the shields flickering until alarms filled the bridge. Ishan shouted that systems were collapsing, but Ryan kept going. The proof key still transmitting its final wave. Mara screamed that the last cannon was powering up. Ryan told her to trust him. He pushed the engines beyond their limits. The ship roared like thunder and shot forward, slamming into the cannon tower, cutting its power core in half. The explosion painted the clouds with fire. Aegis fell back, wounded but alive, the signal complete, the Empire's truth scattered to the stars. When the silence returned, Ryan stood over the wreckage of the command deck, breathing hard. His mentor's face flickered on the cracked screen. A final message recorded before his capture. Kale said, "Courage is not about living forever. It is about buying others the time to choose who they will be." The message faded, but the words stayed inside Ryan's chest. He looked at the planet below, the fires still burning yet. Through the smoke he could see lights rising from the cities, signals of resistance blooming like stars. Aegis whispered softly, "A price was paid, but not in vain." Rian closed his eyes and whispered back, "Not yet. Not until every human stands." The Empire did not sleep after the fall of the cannons. Their fleet spread across orbit like a swarm of burning eyes, while down on Earth, chaos and courage mixed together in the streets. Rian stood on the bridge of Aegis, watching the planet flicker between fire and light. Pockets of rebellion, rising wherever the proof key had reached. Miners throwing down their tools, dock workers opening, gate soldiers refusing orders, each spark a new sound in the rhythm of humanity. Waking from fear, Aegis drifted between debris fields, patching its wounds as it tracked the Empire's transmissions. They were desperate now. They called Ryan the liar, of Luna the false Starborn. But even their lies could not erase what had been shown. Too many people had seen the records. Too many hearts had remembered the truth. The prefect withdrew his fleet into the orbital citadel, a fortress of glass and steel, tied to every command node in the sector. Rian knew the final battle would happen there. Aegis said the citadel controlled not just the weapons, but the story itself. The Empire's entire illusion was anchored in its central archive. Whoever held that node decided what history meant and what truth survived if they could take it. They could break the chain that bound half the galaxy. Mara was still weak, but refused to stay behind. Ishan loaded medpacks for refugees, expecting casualties before the first shot was even fired. Rian looked at both of them and said, "This time we fight not for revenge but for memory." As Aegis moved closer, the prefect's voice filled the void again. Calm and heavy with venom, he said, "Humanity is chaos, given form. We gave you order and you repay us with fire. You could have ruled beside me. Ryan Vale, the Empire would have given you stars to command." Ryan answered without hesitation, "I don't want stars, I want freedom." And the prefect laughed, saying, "Freedom is just a slower kind of cage." Ryan cut the signal and whispered to Aegis to begin the plan. They called it the Mirror Storm, the proof key. Now integrated with Aegis, could speak through the Empire's own communication grid. It could overwrite propaganda with truth, and once activated, it would show every world the reality of the Citadel, its machines, its prisons, its false gods. The only danger was that the prefect's mind net a psychic web of resonance frequencies could paralyze entire populations. With fear, Aegis warned him if the net activated, no ship, no city, no person would move or think until commanded. Rian understood they could not win by strength alone. They had to shatter the net itself. They began their strike at dawn, the Aegis cutting. Through clouds of shattered satellites, Mara guided them under the Citadel's belly, invisible to sensors. Ishan broadcast heartbeat rhythms to resistance cells, below simple drum pulses that matched human breath. 1, 2, 3. Exhale again. Those beats would become their shield against the fear field when the mind net came online. The prefect unleashed it with a single order, a wave of invisible pressure rolling across the planet, freezing bodies mid-step, turning courage into statues. Ryan felt it too. His chest tightening, his thoughts slowing until the relay on his arm began to glow. Aegis amplified the human rhythm across every channel, the steady beat of will, not rage, not hate, just the reminder that they were alive and could still choose. The resistance broke free, crowds chanting the rhythm together, their voices joining the pulse of the ship. The prefect screamed in fury, launching his entire fleet at them, beams of plasma lighting the sky. Aegis returned fire, weaving through storms of energy, each explosion a heartbeat in the song. Ryan led a surgical strike team through the shattered corridors of the Citadel corridors, lined with holograms of the Empire's glory, all lies, now burning. Mara stayed on comms, guiding him deeper, while Ishan covered evac routes for trapped workers. Rian reached the central chamber where the prefect waited, surrounded by the hum of his dying machines. The prefect looked almost human, his armor cracked, his eyes tired. He said, "I was one of you. Once I made peace with survival. I gave them Earth so the rest of us could live. You call it betrayal, I call it realism." Rian stepped forward, saying, "You traded a world for a throne." The prefect smiled, saying, And what will you trade to win? This your ship, your friends, your mercy. Rian raised his hand and the relay glowed brighter. He said, I will trade nothing. I will remind them that we do not kneel. He fired the command through Aegis, linking the proof key to the Citadel's core. The truth storm erupted again, data pouring across the stars. The prefect lunged forward, but Ryan met him with pure human will. The floor trembled, the ceiling cracked, and the mine net shattered under the strain. Aegis took a fatal hit, shielding the evacuation. Convoys, Mara screamed through comms that the ship was breaking apart. Ishan begged Ryan to get out, but he kept his focus until the last pulse of the net was gone. The prefect fell to his knees as the citadel began to crumble. Ryan whispered into the comms, tell them to rise, the signal carried across every channel. As Aegis began to fall from orbit wrapped in fire, yet proud, like the last heartbeat of a dying star. Ryan knew the fight was not over. The Empire still had armies, still had ships, but the story had changed. The people were no longer afraid. The lie was broken, and once fear dies, no chain can hold. He closed his eyes and told Aegis, thank you. The ship replied softly, humanity endures, Captain. Always. The citadel hung broken above Earth. Its crown split open, bleeding trails of fire across the black sky, pieces of metal and light falling like rain. Rian stood on the bridge of Aegis, watching the storm through cracked glass. The ship was dying, alarms, blaring lights fading one by one, each sound another heartbeat of something too proud to surrender. Mara's voice came weak through the comms, saying the civilians were aboard the lifeboats. Ishan shouting that the engines were collapsing and they had only minutes before the core burned out. Aegis spoke softly, saying that the path to survival was open, if they left now. Ryan looked at the ship's console, the proof key still glowing at the center like the soul of humanity itself. He knew there would be no second chance, no other Starborn ship waiting out there. This was the last. He ordered Mara to take the lead shuttle, Ishan to command the convoy. Every voice on the bridge argued with him. They did not want to leave him behind, but Ryan's tone made them stop. He said someone has to guide the ship. Someone has to make sure the citadel falls clean, or the Empire's failsafes will detonate and turn Earth into glass. Ishan tried to reach him physically, but Ryan locked the bay doors. From his console, Mara's eyes filled with tears. She said, you don't have to be the hero. And Ryan smiled faintly, saying, I'm not being the hero. I'm being human. The door closed between them, her last words lost in static as the shuttle engines roared. Ryan sat back in the command chair, feeling the ship's pulse slowing. Aegis spoke again, saying, Captain, you cannot save me, but I can still save them. If you connect the relay to the navigation core, we can become the spear that ends the crown. Ryan nodded, saying, then let's finish what we started. His hands moved across the controls, linking the relay to the dying engine. The ship trembled as energy surged through every corridor, the metal itself glowing like the veins of a living creature. Aegis whispered goodbye in a voice that almost sounded like a person remembering a song. She said, remember, we were built not to conquer, but to protect. Humanity is not a weapon. It is a promise. Rian closed his eyes and whispered, thank you, before taking manual control. Outside, the citadel tried to crawl away using broken thrusters. The prefect's remaining fleet surrounded it, trying to shield their master, but Aegis roared through the void like a sun on fire, its wings of plasma cutting through ships that had once seemed invincible. Ryan guided the ship straight into the citadel's core. Alarms screamed across every channel. The prefect himself appeared on the screen one last time, his face twisted in disbelief, shouting that Ryan would destroy everything. Ryan answered quietly, maybe that's the point. Not everything deserves to last. He pushed the throttle forward and the universe filled with light. The impact split the sky. The shockwave rolled across orbit, tearing the citadel apart. The flames reached the edge of the atmosphere, then died in silence below. On Earth, the people who had been watching looked up as the Empire's symbol crumbled, and for the first time in generations they saw stars unfiltered by control grids. The proof key's last transmission carried across every open frequency. A voice, Rian's voice, calm and human, saying, this is not revenge. This is a beginning. We are not property. We are not machines. We are the children of Earth, and we decide what that means from now on. The wreckage of Aegis fell through the clouds, breaking apart into fragments that glowed like meteors. Some said they looked like tears of light raining upon the oceans. Rescue ships searched for days until one morning, a fishing vessel found a wrecked pod near the coastline. Inside was Ryan, barely alive. His pulse weak, his body burned but breathing. They pulled him from the water and wrapped him in blankets. The captain of the boat said the sky was still shining where the ship had fallen. Ryan opened his eyes and saw the dawn rising gold over the horizon. People gathered on the beaches, pointing at the light, calling it the first sunrise of a free earth. Weeks passed. The Empire's armies fractured, their leaders fleeing, as humans took back their cities one by one. The proof key became the foundation of a new alliance, a record of every truth they had buried. Aegis was gone, but its name was spoken like a prayer. Schools taught children about the Starborn, not as gods, but as people who made mistakes and still chose to believe in something better. Ryan walked among them, scarred and quiet. He never spoke about the final moments, only that mercy had won, not hate. One night, as he stood beneath the stars, a little girl, the same one from the gulag, tugged at his sleeve and asked if the ship would ever come back. He smiled and said, maybe not as steel or fire, but as every choice we make when we stand up and remember who we are. The world turned slowly beneath the constellations, the same stars that once guided the Starborn long ago, and somewhere deep in the ruins of the citadel, a faint pulse of blue light flickered among the debris. A memory of Aegis still alive in the silence, waiting for the next voice, brave enough to answer when the stars call again. Humanity had given its last message, and in doing so had written its first oath. We do not kneel, we stand, we build, we remember, we endure. And that was how the age of the Starborn began. Once more, the sea was calm and wide as the morning rose over a world that had finally taken its first breath of freedom. Ryan stood on the shore, his clothes torn, his skin marked by scars, but his eyes steady on the horizon. The wreckage of Aegis had long sunk beneath the waves, but sometimes when the wind was quiet, he swore he could hear her voice inside the tide, whispering the same words she spoke. Before the end, humanity endures. The people of Earth had started to rebuild the cities, lighting fires, not of war but of hope. Every village, every settlement carrying the rhythm he had taught them, the slow human heartbeat that once shattered the Empire's mind. Now it had become their pledge, a way to remember what it meant to be alive. Children played in the sand with broken pieces of metal shaped like stars. Ishan had turned one of the fallen shuttles into a clinic, teaching medicine to those who once knew only hunger. Mara had rebuilt the resistance towers not as weapons, but as beacons, sending light across the sea. Each night Ryan would climb the hill above the bay and watch them flicker, thinking of Kale, thinking of the little girl who had drawn the Starborn crest, and thinking of all the voices that had carried the message across. The stars, they were gone, yet still present like constellations that stayed in the sky long after their sons had died. He carried their memory not as weight, but as direction. Sometimes envoys from other worlds arrived, timid, curious, bringing news that the fall of the citadel had broken more than chains. It had broken silence. Colonies that once served the Korath now spoke freely, building councils of their own. The name Ryan Vale became a story told to children who never knew the taste of fear. They called him the courier of the last message, but he never claimed the title. He told them it was not his message. It belonged to every human who ever refused to bow, and every alien who chose to listen instead of obey. Aegis was gone, but her echo traveled farther than any engine ever could through the words, mercy, strength, and freedom whispered like prayer across 1,000 worlds. At night, Ryan walked alone along the water, the stars mirrored in the dark surface. He felt small yet infinite, knowing that somewhere out there among those lights more humans were rising. The Starborn legacy living again, not as conquerors, but as keepers of balance. He looked up at the sky and said softly to the silence, we remembered the price, and we paid it, and now we begin again. The wind answered with a quiet hum that almost sounded like the heartbeat of a ship. He smiled, the kind of smile that came only when pain and peace met in the same breath, and for the first time, he felt the future, waiting not in fear but in promise. He turned from the water, the dawn behind him painting the sky in gold, the same gold that once burned across the hull of Aegis. He whispered to the horizon, for every name lost, for every light extinguished we endure. And his words carried far into the wind, reaching the cities and the stars beyond, and maybe somewhere beyond the edge of known space. A spark heard it and stirred awake, waiting for the next call from Earth, waiting for the next Starborn to rise. The end.